Coach, you've said that Julio Jones changed the culture at Alabama. Why did you say that?
Well, I think he changed the culture of the work ethic of skilled players on offense, which is really, I think, important to turn around a program because he was such a hard worker. He had so much mental and physical toughness in terms of the way he competed and the way he played that it was really unusual for a receiver to be that way. Whether it was a running play, a passing play, it really didn't matter. He was trying to excel on that play, and he did it with tremendous tenacity. And you know, most of the time receivers, you know, they want the ball. And if they're not getting the ball, they're over there pouting someplace. And he changed all that and made players look at what you had to do to be a complete player at that position, which was a huge benefit to us.
Tell me a little bit about the 16-year-old kid that you recruited out of Foley, Alabama.
Well, you know, I think of those days, and it's hard to believe. But I think Julio, I think most people would tell you that when he was young coming up, that he was going to be something special. So it wasn't like this was some surprise. I mean, he was a very highly recruited guy, but he was shy. He didn't say much. You know, even the relationship that I had with him when we were recruiting him was, you know, I kind of always wondered, you know, is this guy really like Alabama? Does he really, you know, buy into what we're trying to do here? But after he got here, it was a completely different story. He matured into a really strong, competitive guy that had great leadership and impacted other people in a really positive way.
Was there ever a point that you could specifically recall where you found yourself on the sideline saying, whether if it was a catch he made in a game or even in a meeting, where you said, wow, this kid is something special?
Well, that happened a lot. I mean, it happened in practice a lot. You know, I think one of the things that people don't realize about our program here is the players get a lot better because of who they practice against every day. So there's a lot of very competitive situations going on. You know, D. Milner is a first-round draft pick going against Julio or whatever, you know, might be the case, Kareem Jackson at the time. So they become very competitive. And so you see things happening in practice that you don't even have to wait for the game, you know, to find out, because these guys are working so hard and they're so competitive. And that's one of the things that struck me about Julio right off the bat, is how competitive he was, how much he wanted to win, how important the game was to him, how important it was for him to be good. So it really wasn't some physical catch that he made. The one play that I remember probably more is catching a screen pass and against LSU and looking like he was shot out of a cannon for about a 79-yard touchdown. That was pretty special.
What does Julio mean to you specifically?
Well, I think one thing Julio sort of reflects the culture, that those guys came here when we weren't any good. You know, Julio Jones decided to come to Alabama when we were 6-6, all right, the first year, and they had not been great. All right, so they sort of accepted a challenge to make Alabama something special. So they created the standard, and he was a big part of that. The kind of player he was, the kind of competitor he was, the work ethic he had, the intangibles that he played with. And I think that he epitomizes that every time he comes around here. And he expects that of the players that are here now. And the players that are here now, even though they didn't know him or play with him, and they see him play Sunday on TV, they know that he knows, and they know what the expectation is. And he created that with a lot of other players, but he was a big part of it.
And as someone who's known him for a very long time, Julio is, like you said, a quiet guy in the locker room, but a lot of people talk about the type of leader he is. What's maybe something that people don't know about Julio that you gained to know through all the years that you spent with him?
I don't know that Julio, he is quiet because he won't talk unless he's comfortable, but when he speaks, you always listen. And I think that's the most important thing because of who he is, the kind of thoughts, habits, priorities that are really important to him. And I think that it's a little issue with him if other people don't see things to the same standard that he would like for him to be, or is his expectation for himself. And I think that's when you see the leadership, come out. And he always sets a good example, so he's always somebody that everybody can emulate. But the side you don't see is he does care about the other guys that he plays with, and he's willing to help them be better too, for their benefit, not necessarily for his.
7 years later, Falcons take another wide receiver out of Alabama, Calvin Ridley. What do Falcons fans need to know about Calvin Ridley?
Well, I think these two guys, I don't like to compare guys, so they're not comparable. Calvin's a different kind of player. He's a fine young man. He's a hard worker. It's very important to him to do well. He's smaller, quicker, great getting out of breaks, more of a possession type receiver, but very efficient, effective, very competitive. I don't know. I think you're going to like him.
What makes Calvin unique?
What is unique? I don't know. I mean, I like the word special, better. And I think he's very competitive. I mean, one of the things about Calvin we always had to do here is we had to have the catapult system on him, which is like a GPS to measure, his workload. Because he would work so hard, run so many routes, he'd run himself right in the ground. So you had to pull back and say, okay, you're not taking too many reps today, or we need to hold you back a little bit here, because he'll just keep running until he can't run. So we had to learn how to manage that, with him. But I think he's learned that about himself too. But I think it speaks volumes of the kind of work ethic that he has.
One of the things that Coach Quinn has said in his short time with Calvin so far is that he knew the type of competitor Calvin was, but what maybe surprised him that he's learned is what type of football IQ Calvin has. Did you see that during your time coaching him?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that most of the folks in the NFL will say about our players is they have a pretty high football IQ, because I think we try to teach them what to do, and I think we try to teach them how to do it. But I think we really try to teach them why it's important to do it that way too, which maybe some people don't. So they have a better conceptual understanding of why they're doing something and what they're doing. And I think that we have some really good coaches here who have great experience, in some cases NFL coaches like Brian Daboll was here last year, who coached the Patriots. So this is not their first experience sort of with NFL type offense terminology, route running, whatever it might be. So I think they do develop a little higher football IQ, while they're here, and it's actually sort of expected, from our standpoint.
What type of mentor do you think Julio will be to Calvin?
Oh, I think Julio will be great. I think he's probably been a good mentor for a lot of young players. And I think, Calvin has a tremendous amount of respect for him, so he's obviously going to, be looking up to him. And I know that Julio won't disappoint him in terms of the kind of big brother he tries to be to him.
And Coach Quinn was on your staff when you were the head coach of the Miami Dolphins as a defensive line coach. Was the Coach Quinn you see now the same guy that he was back then?
Well, I knew back then that he had a very bright future. We were fortunate to be able to get him to come to Miami, and he did a phenomenal job with the players that we had. And I knew, because of his energy, his enthusiasm, he's very bright, smart, understands the game well, understands players, and is a good motivator, that he had a bright future. And doesn't surprise me at all what he's been able to accomplish, whether when he was a coordinator in Seattle or now as a head coach in Atlanta, because he just got the right stuff. He thinks about other people, doesn't have a great big ego, really is really a good leader, and I think that's important, when you're a head coach.
Do you feel that you've been around a lot of really, really exceptional coaches? do you feel that Coach Quinn has all of the stuff that can make him be successful for a very long time?
Oh yeah, absolutely, and I think he will be. And I think, I think there's some things about the NFL that is out of the coach's control. All the rules in the NFL are geared toward making everybody go 8-8, be average. So when you do have a good team and you do build a good team, it becomes very difficult to manage the salary cap, to keep your good players on the team, to get enough other good players around you to be able to be consistent in terms of your ability to perform well. And there's only been a few guys able to do that. There's only been a few organizations be able to do that. But Dan has built a really strong team, and now they've sort of competed well for a couple years, and I think he'll be able to continue that.
And you were the first coach who took a chance on Steve Sarkisian when he was trying to get back into coaching. What did you see from Sark that made you say, hey, I want this guy to come on my staff?
Well, I always had a tremendous amount of respect for Sark as a coach. Before any issues came up, I always thought he was one of the best, offensive minds, offensive coordinators, teachers of quarterback, which, to me is very important in terms of not only developing players, but being able to, put it together for the game and get players out there well prepared to be able to execute and do the things that you want to do, and innovative enough to create problems for the defense. So I've always thought Sark was really good at all that. So, me personally, I hate to see people, we all have issues. None of us are perfect in terms of what we do. Sometimes we get condemned pretty good by the media when things don't go exactly perfectly. But I also think there's a lot of good things that can be gained from giving someone a second chance, especially when they can contribute to a large degree to the things that you're trying to do here. And Sark did that, and we were pleased to have him, and I'm glad to see things worked out where he got another opportunity. I mean, we were going to make him the coordinator here, and Dan decided that he wanted to be there, which I thought was a really good opportunity for him.
And since you've firsthand had experience coaching with Steve Sarkisian and Coach Quinn, how do you feel those two will help a young player like Calvin prosper in the NFL?
Well, I think both guys have really good teaching skills. I mean, teaching is, you got to have knowledge and experience to be able to teach, which both do, but you got to be able to inspire learning too. And I think both those guys are very good at that, and they're very patient. I think one of the things that sometimes as coaches, when we're not patient with young players, you got to understand they want to do well, and they have a lot of anxiety about what they want to try to accomplish and do. And as a coach, if you put a lot of pressure on a guy, thinking that there's such high expectations, you're actually contributing to some of that anxiety, which is not going to help the guy perform, and it's going to create a lot of frustration and probably affect his confidence. And I think one of the things that those two guys do really well is manage the personalities of players as they try to develop them.
And what were the conversations like with you, Coach Quinn, and Thomas Dimitroff when they were going through their pre-draft process evaluation of a guy like Calvin Ridley?
Well, a lot of people call, and they call several people in the organization, and we know a lot of people, Scott Pioli, Dan Quinn, Tommy Dimitroff. I mean, they work for us in Cleveland, Miami, someplace. And I think when you work with people, you sort of have a different kind of respect and trust because you've been on the same team before. And so we always have a great relationship with them, and we're always happy to help our players, which really helps them to know exactly what they need to know to make a good business decision as to whether they want them as part of their organization or not.
And if you could kind of summarize, I know you don't like to compare, but Falcons now have two of Alabama's most prolific receivers. What could you say about both Julio and Calvin and what they both bring to the Falcons organization?
Well, I think first of all, they're both great people. So they're going to represent the organization in a first-class way, and I know that ownership that's something that they believe in. And I think they'll both do a great job as competitors, something that everybody that's a fan can certainly respect. It'll be important to both those guys to do the best they can and to try to win every opportunity that they have. And I think they'll be good teammates, and they'll affect other people in a positive way. And I think in professional sports, if you have people like that on your team, that's a real plus.
Coach Saban, we appreciate your time.
All right, thank you.